Wobbly, wobbly. Hello. So I just have a few words on, I think, the current state of Ireland and I suppose the psychic temperature of people in the country. And to change perspective, because I think it's useful and it's helpful to do every now and again, I put myself for this into the position of the politicians that are in the Dáil and the local councillors and everyone that's kind of involved in the state apparatus, right? So people that are in the media, Gardaí, public servants, people in the HSE, all that sort of stuff, right? People whose livelihood is dependent on the current status quo, right? Or the infrastructure as it is, the state infrastructure. And particularly politicians, right? Because I think not only is their position on the line, but if we're to live in an Ireland that has any claim towards morality and justice, then these people's livelihoods are on the line. And I don't just mean in terms of maybe not getting elected again. I mean their freedom is probably on the line, right? So there's definitely enough circumstantial evidence that man in car can throw out here to indicate that these people are involved in some incredibly sinister activities. Their hands might not be dripping in blood literally, but they are metaphorically, right? By their inaction and by the decisions that they make and the decisions that they choose to abstain from making, right? So the consequences are at their doorstep. They have destroyed any semblance of personal responsibility, of even pretending to treat those people who elect them and pay their bills and wages, right? At least some of them. On the surface, that's where they get the money from, right? From your pocket. Of even pretending to treat these people, me, and those who aren't of that class, if you want to use that word, right? Or those who aren't of that same moral standing, inferior or otherwise, right? Or pretending to treat us as adults. They've long forsaken that pretense. They're no longer pretending to treat us as adults, right? And they locked us down. They treated you like we were they treated us like we were children who done something wrong and were incapable of making any sort of caring or rational or considerate decision of our own accord. They didn't believe, and this is telling, right? So they did not believe that you could take safety measures into your own hands and use your own mind and your own thinking. Something that is a gift, right? That you could use that, your own reason, to make decisions that might be beneficial to other people and put people's safety first. They didn't believe that, right? If you're just going on the surface level stuff that you're sold, right? That go on not the words that they were using, right? So don't put granny at risk, all that sort of stuff. They didn't believe that you were capable of doing that by default. So they abused their position of power to steamroll over any sort of constitutional principles that they stand upon, right? We all know the rest of the story. They compelled and emotionally blackmailed, socially manipulated, and convinced the weakest of minds and the weakest of characters in the country, those who are most vulnerable and impressionable in regards to social pressure. They gathered the mass, the herd, right? The herd has always existed. It moves with numbers. They used those numbers and directed those numbers against people who decided to think for themselves and say, well, hang on, that doesn't make too much sense now, does it? Right? So they tried to compel everyone, right? But they used the numbers of the non-thinking people the morally inferior, right? And what I mean by that is they might recognize what the morally correct thing to do is, but they don't have the stomach to be able to stand by that. So they'll go along with the herd, right? They become part of the herd, and together they all make up the herd. And government, all that stuff, whip this herd into a frenzy and turn this herd against the smaller number of people that didn't want to go along with what was being pushed, right? As a result of that, so we're told, about 90% of the population decided to engage in a medical experimentation, a biological, genetic experimentation. And we don't know the fallout of that. We're not sure of the fallout, right? So we know that these things have been linked to heart conditions and problems. We know that there's an abundance of young people after dropping dead, not just young people, but a lot of young males dropping dead in the middle of playing football matches, hurling matches, athletics, you know, in the prime of their life, just dropping dead all of a sudden of heart conditions at numbers that haven't been seen before, right? And they'll try and explain that, look, this has always been the case, but we know it's not. Trust your senses, right? It's not. So what the total number is, we don't know. Are these deaths totally caused by that genetic weapon that was unleashed, that genetic experiment that was foisted upon people, and that people accepted, right? They dangled it, people bought it. Not everyone, but people bought it. It wasn't forced per se. No one was held down that we know of, right? In most cases, people bowed to social pressure. And a lot of that goes on in here, right? And in here. It's not that I didn't have a line of people at my front door saying, get out there now and do this. No one really did, right? People folded. Many people folded. And they can say, oh, it was the social pressure and I was worried about losing my job. And everyone had the same fears, right? Everyone needs to make ends meet together or similarly to each other, right? We all have the same struggles and concerns. Everyone's livelihood was on the line to a certain degree, right? And we all had excuses there that we could have grabbed a hold of and said, that's the line, right? That's the thing that that has me bet every time. I can stand by principle so long as this isn't taken away from me. But ultimately, people have to own the fact that if you give into that, you fold it. You capitulate it. And that's fine. So long as you own it, right? And accept it. And try and grow from that. Go, Jesus, I probably won't make that mistake again. Maybe I did have a little bit more I could have pushed, right? Maybe that wasn't my red line altogether. But anyway, maybe the deaths are caused directly from this thing solely, and maybe it's to do with the placebo effect as well, right? Well studied, well understood, well accepted psychic phenomenon, right? That what you believe, not just what you think, it's what you truly believe can influence your physical health, right? It can influence that for good and ill. There's well-documented cases of this, right? This is a known phenomenon. It's not everyone knows the word placebo, but the true understanding of the enormity of what that means, right? Which means if you believe that your life is at risk based on some invisible thing that you can't see, and you truly come to believe that everyone around you is going to breed on you and kill you, we don't understand the depth of what that does to people's nervous systems, right? So I'm accepting of many different avenues that could be linked to these deaths. We know that the injections are linked to heart problems. That's known, right? There was enough cases exposed and shown and spoken about, right, and publicized that these medications or these drug companies had to put that on their product, right? So we know that that's not confrontational. It's not what's the word? What's the famous word? It's gone out of my mind, right? But anyway, it's not conspiracy stuff, right? This is known. It's a given thing. But there were also a myriad of other reasons that were going on and a myriad of other stresses that people were experiencing, right? But be that as it may, right? So the fallout of that is not understood totally. We know that it's not good. We know that governments across the world, not just in Ireland, different states in America, put COVID positive patients into nursing homes, into, in theory or on paper, the most vulnerable of people are older people. They put sick people in this highly contagious, as we're told, virus that is, the mortality is just through the roof. Hundreds of thousands of people in each country are said to die, right, if not millions. And they put these people out of the hospitals, COVID positive patients, and put them into nursing homes. They've done it in Ireland as well, right? As a result, what did we have? We had an enormous amount of old people dying. Probably a lot of it from loneliness as well, because their family weren't around them. Imagine that, like you're 84 years of age, you've been put in a nursing home, which is bad enough on its own. If you have your faculties about you, you know where you are and you know what you're missing. And then you're looking at, we don't know how long this thing's going to go on, right? I don't know if I'm going to be safe in here and my family are going to be wiped out because they're still out in the world, or whether they'll all be safe and I'll be wiped out in here with all the old people, right? And forgotten about. And my last 6 months is going to be no human contact. Every face I see is going to be covered, right? Half the faces I see in here don't even speak the language that I understand. What misery. That probably killed and stopped more hearts than anything else did, right? And this is all government policy, right? So these things are the result. People will say, look, COVID done all of this to us. No, it didn't. It didn't do that in Sweden, right? It didn't do that in Sweden. COVID didn't do that. Human decision and human choices did this to us. And whose choices? Politicians' choices, right? So these people that are still in power today, right? Most of them on the periphery, if not in center stage, right? They're looking out and they realize if this ever gets out, right? And if this ever gains the traction that it really should, our decisions have cost the lives of family members in numbers that we're not really sure of, because there's no straight answer. There's no investigation. You're poo-pooed off and hand-waved away if you ask questions about it, right? You're called a nut, you're called a conspiracy theorist, because why? They don't want to have a serious conversation about it. There's no serious push for an investigation into the numbers of increased deaths that we know are at a higher clip, a higher rate than they have been previously, or what they should be normally. We know that that's the case, right? And look, anecdotally, look around. How many funerals have you been to? How many people do you know who have got cancers all of a sudden from enormous amounts of stress over the last few years? There has to be a physiological response to that. And a lot of it is in disease, because people went around for serious stretches of time thinking that their life was hanging in the balance every time they took a breath, every time they encountered another human being. People were poisoned against each other, right? And it was a disgusting thing to see. You're walking down the road and you can see people kind of step off the footpath onto the road and nearly turn sideways just to keep an eye on you, right? The bizarre stuff, scary stuff. People were terrified, right? People were terrified, but they were convinced that by being terrified, they were doing the right thing. So their minds were split. On the one hand, their instincts were telling them, I'm terrified here and I want this to end. On the other hand, you're getting massaged morally by people that you tend to see as above you, above your station in life, right? A class above you, the politicians, the well-educated Trinity University doctors, people who've wrote books, who publish papers, heads of the HSE, all this sort of stuff. They're all going, well done, lads. You're all doing a great job for Granny. So your social ego is being massaged by people that you see above you. It's like the High King himself gracing your front garden with a knock on your door, right, and telling you, go on, boy, you're doing great. So people are caught, and in order to not be demonized and to turned into one of them people that people are turning away from because they don't have a face covering on, they go along with the nonsense because they don't want to stand out and have the social floodlight turned on them, right? A lot of people didn't care, right? True individuals that are just like, well, that doesn't make sense to me. Like, she can do what she wants, but I'm going to be over here just continuing on my life the same way I have been before, right? And thank God those people exist. Thank God. That's being alive, right? That's truly being alive. And once you do that once or twice, right, and you bathe in that feeling of, yeah, people can think what they want, they can have whatever view they have of me, but I know at the end of the day that the decision I'm making is purely my own. I'm not dictated to by anyone, and the decisions I make, I'm not in conflict with myself. I am down the line balanced, right? Because I know that the decisions I'm making and the actions I'm taking, I'm doing so because they seem right to me. They seem natural to me. They seem correct, right? So I'm not in conflict with myself. I'm not ashamed of myself in any way because I'm acting according to my own nature. I'm not trying to influence anyone or compel or force anyone to think the same way I do. If they do, that's fine. But you'd hope they get there on their own, right? They don't just follow anything, right? But you sleep comfortably because you know you're centered in yourself, right? You know your decisions are the right ones according to yourself. You might be proven to be wrong, but you went along with your heart and that's fine, right? You sleep better that way. You're not in conflict with yourself. But many people were, right? And I said it at the time and I believe it now. I think many people won't recover from that. Their minds were snapped in half between social conformity and obeying and listening to their instincts, right? And a lot of them, they chose one and to the total disregard of the other, right? And then others probably still listen to a little bit of each side, and over time when the social pressure wanes a little bit, they'll go back to listening to their instincts. But many people have denied their instincts totally and totally rejected it. And you end up with totally schizoid personalities then. And you're seeing this. People that just wage war against ideas. People that wage war against people who think differently to them. It's insanity. It's psychotic, right? Their minds are gone. Their minds are totally gone. And they are now forever enslaved to the whims of the crowd. Because that inner part of themselves that speaks to them and says, do something. Listen to me. That little voice, right? The inner voice. They murdered that. That is gone for a lot of people, and that won't come back. That won't come back. But my point on this, and this is a long-winded way of getting around to what I actually wanted to talk about, right, is the politicians that are in power now, and those who ran for the hills, right, as soon as they could. A lot of them stepped back going, I won't run again. Nope. I want to get out of the limelight now because I know when the dam breaks on this thing, pitchforks and torches, right, this kind of thing. And I would say rightly so, right? Because there's a lot of questions that need to be answered because lives have been lost, right? And young people have been buried at a disgusting rate. And old people were just totally disregarded and offered up, destroyed, right? And these old folks' homes, a lot of them were cleared out for other reasons, right? So what I'm doing now is putting myself into the perspective of these politicians and people in the media, people like Luke O'Neill, these doctors that are out attaching their reputation and attaching the persona that they have and the influence they have to things that are now proven to be not good for you. And they're still banging on about it, right? And they might have financial incentives too, that they might be tied to some of these companies that profited from these instances. More than likely, yes, right? If not, they're just totally nefarious creatures that are just interested in inflicting misery and damage on people, right? And these creatures exist, right? Of course they do. They always have. They always will, right? And it's important that you're able to at least accept that and then build on that and be able to see that, right? Be able to recognize that when you're looking at it. So, given that, if I am these politicians that are in power now, and I recognize that there's a serious likelihood that if these things are seriously investigated, I could go to jail for the rest of my life. Everything I've ever earned could be stripped and taken from me. My family could be homeless, if not in jail with me. Right? My reputation forever ruined. The history books will look at me the same way people today look at Hitler. Maybe that's changing a little bit, right? But you get my point. What am I worried about? And how do I feel when I see tens of thousands of Irish people marching the streets of Dublin for these protests? Very nervous. What do? Do I go out and throw fuel on the fire a little bit? I could do that. But I know if you go out and start physically hurting Irish people, that's a red line for a lot of people. And a lot of people would go, you know what, we can't have that. So next time I'll go up with my brother, because he got cracked the last time he was up there. Or I'll go up, my sister got made a show of by guards, or whatever the case is up there, right? Or the news media broadcast a picture of my mother and just painted her in a terrible light. So I'll go up with her the next time, right? And the numbers might double. So you could do that. But you're going to be watching it anyway, right? You're going to try and read it. You're going to try and manipulate it as well. And you're going to try and channel that anger away from the things that have the biggest repercussions to your life, which are the total disregard for human life in this country over the last 5-6 years. Specifically, you can expand the window if you want, right? But the COVID thing is a real concentrated form of this tyranny, right? Grandparents and kids have been lost as a result of the decisions that were made. So you don't want people thinking about that. You just don't. If you can get them, if you can channel that anger that we know is there, really, whether it's unconscious to people or not, we know that that pent up emotion and frustration of being trapped and treated like a caged animal, even if it was in the comfort of your own home. The fact of being told that you're not allowed to walk the block, you're not allowed to go into the woods, you're going to get arrested if you walk the beach, right? That makes people, there's human instinct will react to that with fight, right? What you do with that instinctual reaction to fight is a different thing, and that's what separates people. Some will go, yeah, I will fight. Some will bury that and go, absolutely not. They'll flee away from it. They might even jump to the other side where the fight is aimed at, right? Because they might see it as more powerful, and therefore I will jump to the winning side, regardless of what I feel about it. I'll go where I feel the power is. And then others will freeze and shut down, right? But that anger is going to be there, and it has to come out at some time. People kind of bottled it up because this is new, haha, some laugh, this is all weird, isn't it? We're all not allowed to go anywhere, haha. We've a bit of a break from life. And it's interesting as well, because I was reading something the other day about the rates of depression and anxiety have been steadily climbing in Ireland, most notably in the younger generations, right? I think that over 55s are between 18 and 25 are about 5 to 8 times more likely to have some sort of mental disorder compared to 55 and over, right? The difference in generations, right? The difference in generations. The younger generations aren't able to manage their own psyche. They're not able to manage their own nervous systems and their own emotions. Their ability to regulate and contain themselves is splintering and falling apart. That's what all these mental disorders are. Your mind is cracking, fragmenting, and you are not able to contain, channel, and focus your own mind. That's what these things are, right? They're not some sort of genetic disorder or genetic mutation or anything like that, right? It's your inability to be able to manage yourself, to be able to care for yourself, right? So you're seeing that, but these things kind of leveled out during the first year of lockdowns, which is interesting, right? So the rates of depression actually kind of fell down a little bit and stabilized, lower than what they were prior to lockdowns. But again, like, they rise up. Why? Because people got a break from life, right? They had a couple of months off work. Great. People had more time with family. Lovely. Good stuff. Right? People started walking more. People, like, nearly everyone was out in the evenings going for a little walk up and down the road, climbing a hill, walking a field if it was close enough, or just going to the beach or going far away if you were bold enough to just go, you know what, you're not stopping me from traveling my country. Right? Whatever the case was, people enjoyed it for a while because it was new, there was a novelty to it. But that doesn't mean that you avoid the consequence of having your choice taken away from you. Right? So that anger bubbles, and it has to come out in some way. So if I'm these politicians, what I'm doing is I'm looking at, okay, we know. If they were genuinely honest people, right, they'd say, you know what, we were in a bit of a corner there, and we did not know what choices to make. We were concerned and worried, and we looked around at countries we saw as a little bit more sophisticated than us, and we kind of just followed their lead. And if there was massive mistakes and casualties along the way, then look, we would put our hands up and own up to it. We didn't know what we were doing. We'd never experienced that like that before in our lives. This is if people are being honest, right? You're not getting that. What you're getting is, well, what did Micheál Martin say? Look, we will have an inquiry, but let's not make it a kind of blame game thing. Let's not look for culprits, or let's not point the finger at people. Why not? Why not? So let's inquire and see if the wrong decisions were made. But if we find that there was wrong decisions being made or had been made, which led to the deaths of people or to misery or to life being stifled in some way, well, let's not blame people for that, because after all, weren't we all in it together, right? Nonsense. Those are the words of guilty people. Those are the words of a guilty conscience. Well, not even a guilty conscience, right? That may be stepping it too far. But those are the words of coming from a mind that knows that it's done wrong, at least in terms of how other people will view it, not necessarily how they view it, right? They mightn't care one whisker, but they know that other people will, right? So, what do? You stifle conversation. You attempt with all the weapons at your disposal to try and redirect the conversation away from one of the biggest humanitarian issues that Ireland has seen in decades. And most countries across the world have seen it in a long period of time, right? Get the lights off that conversation. We'll just plough ahead and pretend that it just never happened. And there's no lingering consequences. We'll attribute that to something else altogether. And you see it in the news articles that started coming out after these vaccines were rolled out were madness, right? So all of a sudden, heart attacks were linked to all sorts of things. Drinking tea all of a sudden was the reason why people were having heart attacks. The weather was the reason why people were dropping dead of heart attacks. You've seen ads on buses talking about the normalization of strokes in children. That is, it's actually really kind of normal that kids have strokes. Okay, right? And the funniest one is one that I remember. So I don't even know if it's funny or just so pathetic you have to smile at it. That change in the duvet cover, a change in the quilt, right, is the reason why people are dropping dead of heart attacks. And I guarantee you that each one of you can give me another one of these news stories that you read along the way as to explaining away the reason why young people were dropping dead on football pitches and hurling pitches and while running. Professional athletes, all of a sudden, their hearts just started giving out at a rate never before seen. Right? Not normal, never been seen before. You can't convince me otherwise, because my eyes don't lie to me. Right? As I'm sure a lot of other people's eyes don't lie to them as well, right? Your mind might lie to you, or you might be able to have your mind convinced that it's perceiving something in a different way after you kind of run it through a filter. But your eyes don't lie to you, right? So, what do? Take the heat off of that conversation. How? by drumming up 50 other catastrophes across the country, as many as possible, make people as miserable as possible. So why? So that their energy, their instincts, their anger is directed at anything else other than the fact that your decisions led to massive amounts of old people being slaughtered in old folks' homes. And a generation of young people dropping dead randomly, apparently, because they were changing their quilt, right? Or they're drinking too much tea, or the weather's a bit weird all of a sudden, so people's hearts are just going bang. No thanks, right? No thanks. And how would you do that? You'd look around and say, well, what do we have here, right? We have wars. We throw up these wars left, right, and centre. We pretend all of a sudden that we are kin with all of these other strange nations that we've nothing to do with. We will try and promote that. That's not working. Well, what else could we do? We could bring war to the country itself. Soft war, of course. Because if we bring a real heated war, like white hot in this country, the numbers of Irish people outweigh the numbers of politicians and the numbers of allies that the politicians can import in the meantime, right? So as much as you want to create a massive enough event that'll take people's attention away from these things, away from their own family history and their damage that has been done to their own family kitchen table, take their attention away from that, get their attention and their interest away from their family, out the front door and onto objectives that are external to what really matters in their life. Get it onto politics, get it onto Dublin, get it onto the streets, get it onto protests, get it onto foreign nations, get it onto foreign countries, get it onto all of these things. Take people's attention out of their hearts, into their minds, and onto things that don't really matter in the immediate now, right? That's what I would do if I was in their position and my life and freedom was on the line. That's what I would do. And these people, above all else, they care about themselves, self-preservation, and how they're seen, right? They are narcissists. They believe that the most important thing is how you're seen by other people. It doesn't really matter what kind of person you are. What matters is how you're seen by other people, what kind of person other people believe you to be, right? So they're very interested in how in their professional and social reputation, their persona. They're very interested in that. They don't want that tarnished in any way, right? They will tarnish everyone else if it means that they can save a bit of face. And they do so, right? And that's fine. Grand, off you go. Recognize it as it is. And know what you're looking at and dealing with. And that brings me to the main point of what I wanted to talk about, after bringing you all that way, right? But I hope you're following me. Because these are big things, right? And I'm getting sick of the surface level interpretations and reading of things, right? So something happens, people talk about that for a couple of minutes, then something happens that's related to the first one, but people aren't linking them. They just jump onto the second thing and go, oh, well, look at that, isn't that weird? Let's talk about that for 5 minutes. And then bang, 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 bang. We're still being led by the nose and by the eyes, right? The same way people that watch RTE and tune in to the 6-1 and watch the ads and watch these little snippets of news information and that's it. And they make their whole worldview based on that. And other things that they hear from their neighbours and all that sort of stuff. It all feeds into it. And then you have people that come along and go, I didn't fall for that trap. I now just go total opposite to whatever is put on. And I make my opinions based on other people that I don't really know, but I still follow what they say, because what they say is different to the enemy information that I see on the box, or that I used to see on the box, right? How do you know that you're not being led by the nose again, right? Have you dealt with that part of yourself that wants to be led? I don't think many people have, right? Because that is a war that you need to wage with yourself. It's a gentle war, but it's also brutal, because it has to be, right? There needs to be tough love, I would say, right? There needs to be a loving surgery and a loving exorcism that needs to occur within yourself. It is only you that can perform this on yourself. You will not get this by following someone's story or listening to a video or reading a book. This is inner work. This is initiation. This is what true religion is, right? Inner religion. This is what religion is, a bastardization of this thing. We used to have rites and rituals that delineated not just an age of a man, but the progress and the development of a man, right? Now they just become cemented by ages and classes. So 7, communion, or 8, whatever it is now, 12, 13, confirmation, that kind of thing. It's just when you become an age. But you can be 30 years of age and still be as moronic as a 12-year-old, right? Prior to that sort of concretization of rites and rituals, you had to have been prepared and tested before you could undergo an initiation. You had to be able to prove that you had developed and grown as a man, as a human being. Your mind had expanded, right? Your heart had blossomed, and your ability to perceive the world in a greater way and a deeper way, right? Without being aligned to any idea that comes from another person. You have to be able to know that in yourself, know what that feels like, and then you will be considered an initiate, right? Whatever way you can, it's an interesting thing, right? But now, wouldn't it be great if I could just carry on with my thought? But look, I won't lose the thread of it too much. I don't believe that many people have got there, right? To overcome that part of themselves that wants to be led, right? That wants to follow, that wants to be part of the herd. We had a great chance with the COVID thing to separate ourselves out from amongst those that wish to follow and bend the knee and bow down. But it also highlighted that many failed that test. So expecting people to have progress beyond that point now is maybe a little bit unrealistic for the majority of people, right? But be that as it may, many have continued on that, and they understand the link between what's going on now and what's going on then, because the link is their own life. The link is their history. They're not guided by external historic events as they happen, right? They're guided by the fact that each of these historical events has a direct link to moments in my life and paths of development in my own spirit, soul, psyche, whatever you want to call it, right? My own maturity, my own development as a human being. They're both linked. They're inextricably linked. You could even say one doesn't exist without the other, right? So, if I am these politicians and I'm looking out and I'm seeing these protests, yes, they're concerning to me, right? But if I can sway the narrative in some way, and if I can get people's energy, attention, focus, and animosity directed at something else other than myself, would I consider that a win? 100%. 100%. If I see people up in Dublin by the tens of thousands standing around listening to someone giving a speech that they gave 6 months ago and 6 months prior to that, right? Heard it all before. I'm sitting in the Dáil, or I'm sitting in Cork in my house looking at it going, they're no threat to me. They're giving out about the consequence of the decisions I've made. They're not really angry at me, right? Because their energy is not directed at me, the cause of it. They're looking at the effect of it, and they're rallying against the effect of it. All the while I go to work, collect my money, and I'm perfectly safe, right? So leave them blow off their steam. It'll burn out in a while. And all the while I'll tick off the few years I have left, and then I'll retire and head off out of the country. Watch it burn from afar, maybe on a yacht. Untouched. unconcerned, unperturbed by the consequences that were never really directed at me. I was safe. I had 2 people call to my office and say that they were annoyed with me. And I'm sitting looking at tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people marching up to Dublin, rallying against the hatred of the government and these people that have been brought in, that I brought in, right? And I'm laughing all day long because their anger is directed at not the source of the problem, but the effect of it, right? And all the while I'm lying in my pockets and I'm assuring my future and my kids' future, because I just see them as an extension of myself. Therefore, I am immortal, right? My kids will be nothing without me, glorious me. So as long as they do well, I'm still alive, right? And these people's livelihoods, their homes, their neighbourhoods, their cultures being taken from them by people that I've brought in and given the land to. And these people are waging war against those who've come in instead of looking at the source of the problem, right? And look, if we're being rational about it, right, 2 things can be wrong at the same time, and you can channel your energy into different problems or at different problems. But many people can't, right? They become overcome with anger and rage against something, and once they latch that onto something, or it's latched onto something for them, they find it hard to disconnect that and pull back and evaluate and say, hang on a second, is this working? We've shown that we can get onto the streets in tens of thousands, but what has that done? Long term, what has that done? It's got a few people into office, and these few people come out and make their speeches. But they're a little bit hesitant about sharing the stage and sharing the microphone with people that have seriously valuable things to say. It's the same old thing. You know, these people are traitors and they're selling out this country, and we don't want we don't want to be planted and replaced. Yeah, we know. But what is the materialization of that energy? Because it dissipates as soon as people go home again. Meanwhile, you go home to a town and a village where your local councillors, no one is calling to them giving out. In a few little places you see it, right? But so my point is, would this energy that was given to Dublin, would that not be better directed at your local councillor? And put the fear of God into him in terms of his next appointment, right? Let them know, we live around you. We know you. We know your family. You will be shunned. We do not want you around here until you do your job properly, right? Would the energy not be better placed doing that? Or even learning something, right? Start teaching people. How come none of these politicians or wannabe politicians in Dublin are bringing up, right, lads, look, we can get thousands of people together. Let's start getting a legal study class going. Let's get that stuff going online. We can all travel up here and enjoy the day and get our flags out. Let's get classrooms and let's start educating Irish people. No one wants to listen to your speech. We've heard it 1,500 times before, right? And this isn't aimed at anyone specifically. But if the shoe fits, the shoe fits, right? But let's start educating people. Let's start getting people talking. Let's start building businesses together, right? Let's start finding a sustainable way of standing up against this tsunami of nonsense that is flooding us at the moment, right? And let's start finding a way where we can start encouraging and enticing people to step away and unhinge themselves from the apparatus that's sucking the life out of them. Because you can only truly fight against something with all of your heart if you believe that what you have is more powerful than what they can take away from you, right? And the power that you believe that they have to take anything away from you. It's only when you have an option B that you can truly fight against anything. And I'm not seeing that at the moment. I think the fact that people are still happy to go up in tens of thousands to Dublin and march, and great, and it's lovely to see. It's beautiful to see. And it's inspiring to see to a degree, right? But it also tells me, again, if we switch hats into the politician's role and look at that, I would be looking at that saying, they don't believe that they can win this. They're too worried about getting in trouble. Right? They're too worried about getting in trouble. We could put out a couple of concrete blocks across the road to stop them from coming to the Dáil. They'll march up to the blocks and stop. They are no threat to us.